Well, hello there, gun fighters. Saddle up for another episode of Gunfighter Life, where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics, the right way, with Almighty God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. As always, I am your host, Michael Milito. I'm blessed to serve you as host today to establish some bona fides, some street cred. I'm going to plug in the bio. Since I don't like talking about myself all the time, I pre-recorded it. It's usually the same one. If this is not your first rodeo here and you've heard it before, then skip ahead. But I think it's a valid question. Why should you care what this person has to say? And it shouldn't be because they're on the internet. That's not a good reason to listen to anybody. So I'm going to plug in the bio. Then we'll get into the main topic, the 12 gauge versus the 20 gauge. Battle of the top two shoddy gauges. That's a working title, but we'll dig into it here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review. I'll roll into a quick abbreviated bio and then into the main topic. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I don't apologize for that. God is number one in my life. I grew up hunting and fishing in the backwoods of the southeastern United States at a very early age. Some of my earliest memories are with firearms. I joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. By God's grace, He got me through that safely. After that, I served as an instructor, an urban warfare instructor and a desert warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps. I also served with the LAPD, both full-time as a sworn police officer and in some more specialized assignments, as well as serving in the U.S. Army, full-time and part-time National Guard. I've been a FBI firearms instructor, still am an FBI firearms instructor, have been for a lot of years, also NRA certified and some other three-letter government agency certified. I've been a private contractor for a three-letter government agency I won't specify. I've been the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. By God's grace, He got me through all that in one piece, not because I'm better, but because He chose to have grace and mercy on me. I've been a professional hunter and guide. Professionally hunted things like buffalo and elk. Not many people today can say they've done that, but I'm blessed to be able to say that I have. I've hunted everything from white-tailed deer on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast to gray squirrel on the East Coast to prairie dog on the West Coast and elk and bear and wolf and slain all manner of beast. A state rifle and pistol champion a few times over in a few different disciplines. Now those experiences, it's not because I'm bigger or badder, certainly not bigger. In fact, I met one of the patrons in real life and he said something to the effect of, "I thought you'd be bigger." Reminded me of that William Wallace movie where he's like, "Oh yeah, if William Wallace were here, he'd shoot lightning bolts out of his rear end." Well, I'm not William Wallace, but I am the person that did all those things in the bio. But not because I'm bigger or badder. I don't think that I survived when many other young, good men did not. I give all the glory and all the credit to God, all the talents and experiences that He's given me and the things that He's let me live through. I hope to use them to glorify God and to help you today. So if I boast in anything, it's not in my strength, it's in that God had mercy on me and saved me because He had a purpose for me. And hopefully I can use those talents, skills, and abilities to serve you today. Now, I don't want to talk down to anybody. There's a term called mansplaining that my wife had to explain to me, which is kind of ironic. I'm not hip with all the cool young lingo. But I'll make my own term here if nobody else has coined it. I'm going to tact-explain to you. Maybe you know this, maybe this is blatantly obvious, but I get new people all the time, new listeners, new shooters. You didn't pop out of your mama's womb knowing the difference between a 12 gauge and a 20 gauge, so bear with me. Shotguns in a lot of ways are like guns on opposite day, whereas caliber is measurement of the bore diameter in inches. 30 caliber is 0.3 inches. 25 caliber is 0.25 inches or a quarter of an inch. 50 caliber is 0.5 or half an inch. You get it, right? Gauges are the opposite of that. A gauge is the amount of lead balls of said diameter that equal 1 pound. So 12 balls of 12 gauge diameter equal 1 pound. Take that metric system. 20 gauge, obviously, then, would be 20 balls of the same diameter equaling 1 pound. So a 20 gauge is smaller than a 12 gauge. A 12 gauge, though, to put it in caliber, if that's the way you think, is about 0.72 inches, and a 20 gauge is about 0.615 inches. Anyway, with that said and thinking about that, that doesn't do a lot of good if you can't picture it in your head, so I'll probably make the thumbnail for this a 12 gauge next to a 20 gauge. Now, 12 gauge is in a lot of colors, but generally, 20 gauges are yellow. That's so you can't accidentally throw a 20 gauge in your 12 gauge and have some real issues, like it sliding somewhat down the barrel and you chambering a 12 gauge behind it and having a really bad day. Don't do that. That's your public service announcement for the day. Decide if you're going to put the right ammo in it. Anyway, so 12 gauge is bigger than 20 gauge. Let's start off by talking about the 20 gauge. The 20 gauge is beloved by many an upland bird hunter. It's a great gauge for that. It's also a great hunting caliber. For pretty much anything deer and down, 20 gauge does fine. 20 gauge is great. It's a completely different system. But if you look at the foot-pounds of like a 20 gauge slug, it's about the same and achieved by completely different parameters, right? Foot-pounds is, to get scientific, force equals mass times velocity squared. Much heavier bullet, or projectile rather, going at a much slower velocity, but it's roughly the same amount of foot-pounds as a 20 gauge and a 243, which is a phenomenal deer caliber. Just put it in perspective. Now, that said, the shotgun is beloved by upland game hunters. It's plenty enough for any upland game. It's great for small game. It's great pheasant, quail, dove, and any other small game. Coons, that's raccoons. Possums. It's even with some better technology become quite a turkey go-to. And squirrel and rabbit. It's a classic. It's not the only one, but it's a classic. Now, it's plenty powerful enough for tactical application. It is plenty powerful enough for anti-personnel device. Right? It's plenty enough for home defense. It's plenty for a truck gun. If you look at the amount of power and stopping power, if we can use that term, which is kind of not really a great term to use, but I can't think of a better one. If you look at a full payload of buckshot out of a 20 gauge, is lethal. It's just devastating. And a 20 gauge slug absolutely is out to reasonable ranges, which let's say 125 yards, 150 yards and in. If you know how to aim a shotgun and actually do your research and make sure it shoots point of aim, point of impact, and not just buy rounds at Walmart and assume it's going to go where you aim it. That's not how that works. You wouldn't expect a deer rifle to do that. I don't know why people expect a shotgun to do that. But if you do your due diligence, absolutely can be a 100, 125, 150 yard gun and absolutely lethal. The accuracy of a slug out of a smoothbore gun, the killing foot-pounds probably exceeds the amount of accuracy. You're going to lose accuracy to make it less effective before you're going to lose power to make it not lethal. Let's put it that way. So it's plenty powerful enough. What are the big advantages of the 20 gauge? Some of the big advantages are the ammo is in and of itself lighter and smaller. It's one of the big disadvantages of a shotgun versus like a 22 or something. The ammo is quite large for what it is. So let's say you're going out for a day of rabbit hunting or a day of pheasant hunting, which is, I'm in northern Idaho, a lot of pheasants around here. Delicious, beautiful, healthy way to put meat on the table. Let's say you're going out for a day of pheasant hunting. You might be covering a lot of miles. Let's say chucker. Chucker, if you don't know, are like a partridge or a really big quail. Anyway, they like it in rugged, rocky, high-up terrain. So even more so there, you're covering a lot of miles on foot in a day. And you're carrying a box or 2 or 3 of ammo. Right, that adds up, both in space and weight. So it's smaller, lighter ammo. And again, plenty enough power to kill the bird in question, right? So if you're that's why it's a go-to for like upland bird hunting. Same thing if you're back east and you're doing a day of rabbit hunting and you're walking all around fields chasing after beagles. I grew up in a family that raised beagles and rabbit dogs, so yeah, it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot going into that. And you're doing a lot of walking. Why not grab a 20 gauge? It's a go-to for that. Not only the ammo, the gun itself is generally lighter. Now, you could get some cheap budget guns where they're basically made on the same frame. But in general, if you look at like a classic Remington 870, the 20 gauge is quite a bit smaller, sleeker, svelter, and lighter than the 12 gauge. The 20 gauge is going to be lighter, smaller, handier than the 12 gauge. So if you're doing all those miles on foot in the field, that adds up. That's a big advantage. Also, felt recoil. There's less recoil. So if you're shooting a lot of rounds in a day, instead of doing the machismo thing and be like, I don't even feel recoil. Recoil, what's that? Like, recoil adds up, especially with a shotgun. Shotgun's a pretty potent weapon, especially to be shooting all day. You know, go sight in a shotgun with slugs, which I've done many times. After the first couple of boxes of slugs, it's not super fun anymore. So the 20 gauge has less recoil. That is a big advantage. Also, if we're talking about tactical application, if you have multiple adversaries, I don't care how fast you recover from recoil. If you reduce recoil, you can recover from it faster. And again, a full load of buckshot, I don't know of any case where somebody took a full load of buckshot from a 20 gauge and they were fine. They kept doing whatever they were doing, but if you'd hit them with a 12, they'd have went down, right? It's like you're hammering in a little teeny nail to hang a picture in your house, like a little tiny finishing nail. Does it matter if you hit it with an 8-ounce hammer or a 12-ounce hammer? Both are more than powerful enough to drive a little finishing nail into a 2x4 to hang a picture. To use an analogy, like both, it's superfluous the amount of extra power you get with the heavier hammer. And it's superfluous for most tactical situations, the amount of power, for most tactical situations, the amount of power that you would get out of a decent, properly constructed load of buckshot from either gauge. So you can get faster follow-up shots if you compare apples to apples, like a pump to a pump, a semi-auto to a semi-auto. I don't care how good you control recoil. If you reduce it, you can get consecutive hits, as long as you don't like close your eyes and blink or something like that. Consecutive hits on a given target at a given distance faster. That's how that works. That's how the math works. If you reduce the recoil, you get follow-up shots faster. Can I shoot fast with a 1911 45 like my Colt Combat Elite? Yes, I certainly can. Can I shoot my STI 2011 and 9mm faster at a given, let's say, steel plate at 7 yards and get consecutive hits? Yeah, I can. That's how that works. Same with the 12 gauge versus the 20 gauge. Also, if you have smaller statured shooters, younger shooters, female shooters, or you yourself are just really small statured, you're going to find a lot more options for youth 20 gauges than youth 12 gauges. Like a lot of companies will have like a youth model 20 gauge. And not that you have to be a youth to run one of those. I actually really like youth model 20 gauges. So size and weight of ammo, especially if it's like a survival gun, something like that, where you're carrying a lot of ammo. You're carrying on foot with your Lamborghinis what you can carry, what you can have on you. You could probably carry more than 20 gauge, both in space and weight. And I want you to understand this. Pretty much the velocities are going to be the same, and loads differ. But if you're comparing apples to apples, it's not like the 12 gauge is faster because it's bigger than the 20 gauge. It's not how that works. And again, if I'm tact explaining to you, my bad. But if you don't know, it's not like how a shotgun works. Let's say you're shooting number 6 shot, which is a good rabbit, pheasant kind of load. It's not like the 20 gauge number 6 shot is leaving that 20 gauge with less power pellet for pellet than the 12 gauge. Are probably very similar if you're using a very similar like Winchester load or a Kent load or something like that. Probably very similar velocities, maybe identical, but you're getting more pellet. So each individual pellet of number 6 shot is likely going the same velocity. So if you, let's say, hit a pheasant with 3 pellets of number 6 shot from a 20 gauge, it does the same thing as it's going to do with 6 pellets of number 6 shot from a 12 gauge versus a 20 gauge. You're going to do the same amount of damage. Now, the key to that is that the 12 gauge in general is going to have more pellets. So let's just say if a standard number 6 shot for a 20 gauge, like pretty stout game load is 1 ounce. You're getting 1 ounce of shot, however many pellets that is. I'd look it up, but it's really not germane to the topic, right? You get 1 ounce, let's say, for a pretty stout, fairly high velocity number 6 shot game load in a 20 gauge. A pretty standard vanilla 12 gauge is going to give you 1 ounce and an eighth to 1 ounce and a quarter. That's 25% more if we go from 1 ounce to 1 ounce and a quarter. So that makes a difference. Just so you're looking at it in the right context. So lighter ammo, smaller ammo, lighter guns, less recoil. Those are your big advantages. Now let's switch over to the 12. What are the big advantages of the 12 gauge? What's the most common? Economy of scale. Even though the 12 gauge is bigger, it doesn't really make sense. It's got more lead, more metal for making the shell itself. More. You would think it will cost more, but it doesn't because of economy of scale. It's kind of like if you're already into the handgun world, like 9mm is bigger, pretty much the same in every way, except it's bigger, more powerful, heavier bullet than the 380. But the 9mm is cheaper than the 380 because there's so much more of it. Same with the 12 versus the 20. So you're probably paying the same or more for getting less ammo. So that's a big disadvantage to the 20. Also, since it's not as common, most of the things they make, you're going to be able to get in a 20 gauge. It's the second most common. So it's not like it's hen's teeth trying to find buckshot in a 20 gauge. But it's a lot less common and a lot less offerings. Let's say in general, you go to a big box store, they may have 1 or 2 loads of decent defensive buckshot in 20 gauge, but they may have many times more buckshot loads in a 12 gauge. So just to throw that out there, like the ammo variety is much greater. Right, in 20 gauge buckshot, just to give you an example, because it's smaller in diameter, so, double-aught, the classic military law enforcement round double-aught buck doesn't stack well in a 20 gauge. You're probably looking at number 3, number 4 buck. And that's a good load. But you get the idea. In 12 gauge, it's not uncommon to find number 4 buck, which is my general go-to. Number 1 buck can be found. Double-aught buck, triple-aught buck. You get the idea. There's a lot more general variety in 12 gauge. And because it is the de facto military law enforcement round, there's a lot more defensive options. You're talking about game hunting options, there's a lot in both. If you're talking about defensive options, there's a lot more variety of defensive options and affordable defensive options readily available in the 12 gauge. Right? 9 pellet double aught buck is kind of the standard, but just in that world, in the 12 gauge, again, we talked about the 12 gauge is way more than enough power in double aught buck in any buckshot to put down any two-legged thing. Right? It just is. It's way overpowered. That's why a lot of law enforcement agencies have started using reduced power buckshot. Like, instead of, they've cut back. Either they've gone from 9 pellet, which was a pretty standard load, to 8 pellet, or they've gone to less velocity because they realize they don't need all that velocity because dead is dead and death doesn't come in degrees. You hit somebody with a full payload of double aught buck, whether it's 8 pellets or 9 pellets, the difference is kind of academic. It's about as close to lights out flipping that switch as you're going to get. Besides the CNS, central nervous system shutdown, right? A full load of double aught buck will do it. And 9 pellet versus 8 pellet, 1350 feet per second versus 1145 feet per second, you're arguing academics. So there is a lot of options. The whole point of that, there's a lot more options if you're looking at just buckshot. Slugs, there's some pretty decent options of slugs in 20 gauge, but there's a lot more options for slugs in 12 gauge. Now, that may or may not be important to you, but we're looking at the advantages of the 12 gauge. There's a lot more options, especially in the defensive world. Deep penetrator slugs, one of my favorites. Things like flight control buckshot, which I also really like, which I don't think are available in 20 gauge. It just means it holds its pattern tighter in an open choke shotgun. It's a specialty kind of wad that allows you to get much longer range and keep all your pellets on target than historic traditional buckshot. Readily available in 12 gauge. 20 gauge, I don't even know that it exists, let alone being readily available. Another thing, we talked about most game. Well, dangerous bear defense, as much as people like to talk about the 10mm and the 44 mag, like for actual guides and stuff in dangerous bear country, one of their go-to things is a shotgun, a 12 gauge shotgun with slugs. Because it works. A 12 gauge shotgun with slugs, like for most things, like for hunting deer, a 12 gauge slug versus a 20 gauge slug, difference is academic. You're talking about a charging grizzly bear or a brown bear, the difference is not academic. The 12 gauge is more powerful. Also, ironically, waterfowl, which is not like a charging grizzly bear, but the thing is, in pretty much every place for waterfowl in certain states, you can shoot a person with lead ammo, that's fine, but you had better not shoot a bird with lead ammo. That's crazy. That's way too dangerous. So we have to shoot birds in general with non-toxic. The cheapest non-toxic is steel. Steel does not work as good as lead. That's why most bullets aren't made out of steel. It just doesn't work as well. Force equals mass times velocity squared. Remember that came up earlier in the episode. Well, I don't think I have newsflash, right? It's not news to anybody that steel is not as dense as lead. So it's less effective for the same size shot. So you have to move up to bigger shot, which means you get less shot in a shell. That's how that works. So if you're talking about waterfowl hunting, you can certainly hunt waterfowl with a 20 gauge. But the vast majority of people, unless they're a youth shooter or a female shooter or something, most people that hunt waterfowl, talking goose, talking ducks, they generally move up to a 12 gauge. Sometimes they even move up to a 12 gauge 3.5 inch shell. It's like a whole other gauge. It's not really, it's still a 12 gauge, but usually most shotguns in 12 or 20 will shoot the standard 2 3/4 inch, and most today will shoot a 3 inch shell. Most will not shoot a 3.5 inch shell unless you get a specialty shotgun designed to shoot a 3.5 inch shell, which again is an option with a 12 gauge. So for waterfowl hunting, there really is an advantage when you got to shoot the steel shot with a 12 gauge, because you have to move way up in shot size. Can you shoot waterfowl with a 20 gauge? Yeah, you certainly can. But you start getting up into that bigger shot, like when you start going from numbers to letters, like B and BB and triple B and T shot, those kind of things, it's just less efficient to stack those in a smaller cylinder. So the 12 gauge has a distinct advantage there. So if you're going to be doing a lot of waterfowl hunting, The 12 gauge is the obvious answer for that, unless you're really recoil sensitive, or somebody that's going to be shooting that gun is really recoil sensitive. So those are your big advantages for the 12 gauge. It is the default. It is the de facto military law enforcement shotgun gauge. It is by far the most popular. Now, 20 gauge is the second most popular. It's not like hen's teeth. It's not like the 410 where it can be really hard to find ammo. It's not like a 28 gauge. But 20 gauge is not as common or popular as 12 gauge. It just isn't. So the 12 gauge is the standard. It is the most common. It is the standard military and police round. It has the most variety of different types of shot. Whether you're talking, well, across the board, but especially when you get into buckshot and tactical type loads, there's a lot more for 12 gauge and 20 gauge. Now, there's still some really good options in 20 gauge, but there's a lot more in 12 gauge, so it wins that. It's also more powerful. Again, I said for a lot of things that's not going to matter, but for some things it does. It is more powerful. It is a more powerful shotgun. Its big downsides being size and weight of ammo, size and weight of gun, and recoil. I'm not going to get into action types and stuff. I've done plenty of other episodes on shotguns. Pretty much any shotgun that you're going to find action type in a 12, you're going to find in a 20 as well. Right? Pump, semi-auto, side-by-side, single shot. You're going to get any of them in either one of those gauges. So there's no real difference there. So you have to ask yourself which one is better for you. And that really depends. What are you mostly going to be doing with it? Right? If you're mostly going to be hunting pheasants, upland game birds, quail, dove, and it's the only shotgun you have and you may use it for home defense, there's still decent buckshot options. If the majority of the time you're going to be using it for upland game bird hunting, you can get that and then also get some number 3 buck, and it's a decent home defense gun. I'd say the 20 gauge is probably the best choice for that. Is it going to be one shotgun for the family? Like you and a teenage daughter and your wife are going to be shooting it and they're not the biggest of people? Then the 20 gauge maybe makes more sense. Are you doing a lot of long hunting, meaning you're covering a lot of ground on foot? The 20 gauge may get the nod. And there may be some other caveats, but those are the common ones I can think of. In pretty much any other circumstance, I'd say go with the 12 gauge. Ammunition is generally as cheaper. It's more available. It's more common. There's a lot more tactical options. Unless you're really recoil sensitive, if you can handle the recoil, there you go. Also, since it is more common, there are quite a few really good reduced recoil loads. You talk about a heavier gun with a reduced recoil buckshot load, I don't know that the recoil is going to be any more than a 20 gauge with a full power load. Again, we get to there's a lot more availability of ammo, so that might not even be a thing. But the gun is going to weigh more. That's part of the reason you're going to get reduced recoil is you're shooting a lighter load through a heavier gun. So it's not really fair there, but if it's just recoil and it's for defense, you're... Anyway, so you get the idea there. If there's none of those other caveats, you're probably better off with the 12. It's more available. There's a lot more variety of ammo, especially in the tactical world and slugs and buckshot. Obviously, you can hunt anything you're going to hunt with, 20. You can also hunt with the 12. It's just going to weigh more. You're going to have to carry the gun and the ammo. But certainly you can hunt rabbits, you can hunt pheasant, anything like that. So unless there's one of those caveats steering you towards the 20 gauge, the 12 gauge is the default. It's the easy answer for most things. Assuming you're an adult military age male that can handle the recoil. And a lot of that just has to do with economy of scale. It is the military police default. It is like the standard. If that were reversed, I would probably recommend the 20 gauge as your default, and then if you had a reason, like you were going to do a bunch of waterfowl hunting, you would go to the 12. But that's not the case. The default, the standard, is the 12 gauge. So I'm going to say that should be your standard unless you have a caveat to go to the 20 gauge. Like you're mostly going to hunt pheasant or you're mostly going to hunt rabbit. You just want a home defense load just in case. But if you don't have one of those caveats, I'd say the 12 gauge is your clear winner. Anyway, that's pretty much going to wrap this up. It's a ballistics episode. Now, I did a little bone to pick with some of the listeners. I did a survey and asked what you guys wanted more of, and the clear winner on that was deep philosophical episodes. Well, I've been doing a lot of deep philosophical episodes. And I don't mean philosophical like the 12 gauge versus the 20. I mean like use of deadly force. Like deep things like that. And I've seen the numbers drop. Don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Obviously, I think those episodes are more important. They are more important, but that doesn't mean people want to listen to them. When I do ballistics episode or like top polymer handguns or this bolt action rifle versus that bolt action rifle or stuff like that, those tend to do pretty good. So, prove me wrong. If you want more of the deep philosophical episodes, you better start listening to them and sharing them. Anyway, this, since I've been doing a lot of those, this is more of a ballistics comparison episode. 20 gauge versus 12 gauge. Which one is right for you? That's probably a better title than whatever I said in the beginning. I hope you liked it. I appreciate you listening. The subtitle for Gunfighter Life is Survival Guns. There's a duality in survival. You've probably heard me say that before, putting food on the table and defending oneself. The shotgun is great for both. The shotgun is the most versatile weapon. Something I did today, most new polymer stocks are hollow. A lot of times they just have 2 screws in the back and you take off the butt pad and there's a big hollow space back there. Well, that's a pretty cool survival cache. You can put things like a spare round of shotgun ammo, maybe a couple, but at least one spare round of shotgun ammo. The cool thing about a shotgun is they're got a really big bore and they're typically pretty easy to clean compared to like a rifle. You can put a piece of 550 cord back there a little bit longer than the barrel. You can either, get a little plastic baggie and put a piece of cloth that's pre-oiled, pre-soaked in CLP or something back there, or you can get a little like single serving size of gun oil and put it back there. Put an extra X-Acto knife blade back there or something in case you go hunting and you just had a dump of information that day and you totally forgot your knife. It's supposed to be in your pocket, but you killed something and guess what? The knife's not in your pocket. Is a razor knife, a razor blade, a great butchering implement? No, but it's a lot better than nothing. So having one of those back there, it weighs very little. And really do what you want. You want to put a little button compass back there or whatever. You get the idea. A lot of those stocks are hollow. If you need to fill in the space, some real light, like those styrofoam packing peanuts that usually come in a box that are free. Or free to you anyway. That way stuff doesn't rattle around or you fill it with clean paper towels or whatever. But you get some extra survival supplies in the stock of the gun you're carrying anyway. It'll add a little bit of weight, but probably not very much. Anyway, that's your tactical tip of the day. Your tactical verse of the day. You shall rise before the gray-headed and honor the presence of an old man. There's a lot of new stuff in the gun world and the tactical world, and I'm not against new technology and new things, but there's likely some gray-haired men in the world in your area that may have forgotten more about hunting with a shotgun than a lot of men today will ever know. So if you get a chance, right, it seems crazy to me that today we take the oldest and wisest among us and shove them in a home so they're not an inconvenience. Like, they are a valuable part of society. If you get the chance to pick the brain of an old hunter, especially going back to like the Depression era and stuff where people fed there literally, not like did it for sport, not drove around on a $20,000 side-by-side, which there's nothing wrong with that, but that's sport. Like when people hunted to put meat on the table. If you get a chance to talk to one of those gray-haired men, honor that presence. Take advantage of that wisdom. Pass that wisdom on. Absorb it. If you get a chance to learn from an old-timer, appreciate that for the treasure that it is. You shall rise before the gray-headed and honor the presence of an old man, and fear your God. With that, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.